Part 316. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3159. The two children fell asleep after feeding. Sure enough, it is human nature to want to sleep after eating. Although they fell asleep, they were still carried out to have their hair shaved. The outside artisan who specializes in shaving the child's hair was hired outside. He shaves the hair gently. Joe Man watched and felt that the child slept a little more soundly. Is there any benefit to shaving? Little Chien twisted a warm towel and wiped their heads. The two children moved, their eyes seemed to open a little, but they quickly closed and went back to sleep. Zhengxi took out two small hats, put them on with a smile, and whispered, "I made them for them to breathe. Even if they wear them now, they won't get hot, and they won't catch cold." In addition to the hat, the Zheng family also gave them a little rabbit carved in jade, but unfortunately they are still young and can't play with these toys. So Zhou Man, Bai Shan, and Bai Erlang generously took it for them. Children fall asleep, and their parental moments are useless. Zhou Man brought a jade-carved rabbit back to the study, played with it and put it aside. "I've figured out how to write it." Bai Shan smiled and handed her the ink he just sharpened. "Give it to you." Zhou Man took the inkstone, put it aside, handed him his empty inkstone, and glanced at the official documents on his case. "Do you still have so many official documents?" Bai Shan nodded. "The summer harvest is just around the corner, all the Zhuangzi have to make arrangements, and the official salt for the next season is also preparing. This time the preparation time is half a year shorter than before, so there are many things to arrange." Zhou Man felt that he was not very relaxed, and suddenly became happy, and excitedly began to write his own essays. Even the sentences were more lively than before. After finishing the writing, I polished it up and copied it on the blank booklet and sent it out. She felt that her writing was very good, and the Ministry of Personnel would probably agree, and the court officials should not object. After all, this is a win-win situation. Zhou Man happily continued his career of vaccination and medical treatment in Bihai County, while waiting for the reply from the capital. As a result, she waited for a 10-day without any news, and after waiting for another 10-day, the wheat was all collected, and the officials who bought salt for the second time came to Bihai County, and she still had no news. Zhou Man was dissatisfied. When did the work efficiency in Beijing become so low? Bai Shan took out a letter and handed it to her. "You've been busy vaccinating recently, and I don't have time to talk to you. Take a look." "What is this?" "This is Brother Tang's letter. By the way, I still have a letter from Mr. Tang." Bai Shanyi found it and gave it to her. Zhou Man didn't read the content, but first scanned the envelope. "It's all for you." Bai Shandao, if there is no medical department involved, they naturally won't write to you. Taking advantage of Zhou Man's time to read the letter, he summed up what happened in the capital. "I calculated the time, and unfortunately, when your letter arrived in the capital, it should have come across the matter of Mr. Wei's letter to reform the salt administration. The salt administration reform Wei Ji has been shouting for 2 years, but he has been preparing for nearly 10 years. Everyone in the court knew that Wei's he wanted to reform the salt administration, especially the salt tax problem in the south of the Yangtze River. But how to reform specifically, because Wei Ji has never had a specific upper limit, no one knows except the emperor and a few related ministers. This time, Wei Ji went up and down and listed the salt reforms in detail, which naturally included the salt tax reform. As soon as the book went up, not to mention the officials of the Jiangnan faction, the entire court was shocked, and then there was a loud noise, some who were loudly opposed, and some who were loudly expressing their opinions, but very few agreed. For such a big matter, Zhou Man's book at this time is not worth taking to the court to discuss in Begwen's opinion. Zhang Shushan just glanced at it and gave his opinion to be discussed. Now that the court is in a mess, this kind of non-urgent matter should be put aside for now. Mengxia province didn't even have any opinion on this approval opinion. After the review was approved, it was sent to the Ministry of Personnel, with a message saying, "It's something to think about." That is, you can think about it now. But just think about it, not to mention whether the Ministry of Officials is happy or not. He is just willing and very active to promote this matter, and the people's family and the central book can turn around and forget about it. Now everyone's mind is on the Salt administration, as well as the officialdom in Jiangnan, who has the mind to focus on other trivial matters. Like other things, there are old-fashioned rules to follow: disaster affected, tax exempt, and this kind of thing follows the old rules. After a quick decision, everyone will continue to discuss about the Salt administration, and occasionally greet me accidentally. The others body, morals, and even ancestors. As for a book like Joe Man that does not have an old example, if it is not very urgent, it will be put aside first, and if it is very urgent, it will be taken out for quick discussion and a decision will be sent to it. Therefore, except for officials like Joe Man, many officials actually feel that the efficiency of Beijing's work recently is very high, much higher than before. After reading the letter, Joe Man was stunned. "So this is because I chose a bad time to write the book, and then I got scammed." Bai Shan nodded. "I don't think the Salt administration reform has been decided yet, so everyone shouldn't be in the mood to discuss your case." Joe Man took out Mr. Zhuang's letter and read it carefully again. Mr. Zhuang wrote down all the key points of Wei Zhi's salt policy reform and sent it to Bai Shan. Joe Man asked him, "What do you think of Master Wei's method?" Bai Shan nodded and said, "I don't know what will happen in the future, but for now, this reform method is indeed beneficial to the country and the people. Wei Zhi should have wanted to reform the salt administration for a long time, so he was well prepared." Even if Bai Shan looked at the reform with a critical eye, he could not find a few problems. Joe Man pointed to the red critique on the letter and asked, "You wrote this?" Bai Shan glanced at it and nodded. "You don't recognize my characters." Joe Man ignored him, but looked at the lines of red criticism and said, "You set the price of salt so low, I'm afraid the reform will be more difficult." "I know," Bai Shan said, "but the opportunity is so rare. If you don't pass this time, it will be even more difficult to reform next time." He said, "It's different now. Now that we have the method of drying salt, the cost of making salt has been greatly reduced. At this price I suppressed, the county offices in various places still make money. Although it is small and quick to sell. Private salt has been banned over and over again. Why is this?" Bai Shan said. "It's because the price of official salt has become very high after the salt tax and the income of various county offices. But the county office is the place to manage the people, not a business name. And it should not be for profit. If official salt is cheaper than private salt, will the people still buy private salt? And when the profit of salt is reduced to a certain extent, how many people will smuggle salt?" Joe Man pondered, but still shook his head after a long while. "I know what you said is right, but you definitely can't tell the officials in the court like this, and you can't tell the county government about your thoughts, otherwise the salt administration reform will be even worse. Difficult to implement. Tonight is too late, there is another chapter to be updated tomorrow morning. Go to bed first, good night." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3160. Joe Man was involved in every step of the establishment and expansion of the Imperial Physician's Office and the local physician's office. Looking back, no one was optimistic about the Imperial Physician's Office and the local physician's office. Don't say really run a local medical office. In the beginning, it was just that the emperor was willing to pay for it himself, and the Imperial Physician Office also made sense, so the ministers reluctantly agreed to open it. So Joe Mantai knows how important the word agree is. She said, "We should be small and broad, and let them agree first." Bai Shan's eyes fell on Mr. Zhuang's letter, and he frowned. "Are you saying that Lord Wei's salt administration has to take another step back?" Zhou Man shook his head. I don't know, how can I assert about the adults, but I know that the more you want to change, the more you need to pay, otherwise you won't be able to do it. Bai Shan was just annoyed and put the matter aside. He is now a small county magistrate, far away in Qingzhou, and the salt administration reform in the capital is still far away from him. But this little scoundrel is being constantly mentioned by the big bosses in the DPRK at this time. Mr. Tang agreed with the salt administration reform, but he did not fully agree with Wei Zhi's reform plan. There were many seniors who thought the same as him. The emperor really didn't want to listen to their quarrels at the great court meeting, so he simply found a good day to call everyone into the palace to play chess and drink tea, and have a light meal by the way. Talk about it carefully. Wei Zhi thinks that the salt can be handed over to the merchants. He said, nowadays, the business travels all over the world, and it is much cheaper for them to transport the salt than for us to transport the salt alone. Similarly, the price of the salt can also drop even more. Old Master Tang frowned and said, businessmen seek profit, and low prices are just a temporary illusion. In the future, they will master the road of salt, and I am afraid that the disaster will not be much worse than the current Jiangnan salt administration. However, Lu Shangsha shook his head and said, otherwise, as long as we master the salt field, they won't be able to find out. Lord Tang still shook his head with a serious face. No, the profits are too large, and when the government and businessmen collude, I'm afraid that the people will have nowhere to sue. Li Shangsha frowned. Your Majesty Shengming, and the censor desk is here, how can this kind of thing spread? Old Master Tang glanced at him without saying a word. Some words were difficult to say in front of the emperor. Seeing Li Shangshu insist, he stuck his neck and said, look at the history books and you will know. Li Shangshu was about to take him and ask him what he meant when the emperor, who had been silent, hurriedly said, all right, I know that emperors are not necessarily wise, and it's not that they will not appear in Dajin. Tang Qing's concerns are not unreasonable. The emperor stopped the two who were about to quarrel, and after a pause, he said to the old man Tang, but we can't stop eating because of choking. Wei Zhi nodded and said to everyone, I have made a calculation with Lu Shangshu. If we distribute salt to the merchants, and they will operate the official salt sales, the cost of each bucket of salt can be reduced by at least 5 cents, plus Bai Shan's exposure. The salt method, the combination of the two, can reduce the price of salt to 50 cents a bucket. The ministers who attended the meeting frowned, finally knowing why the officials of the Jiangnan faction and the aristocratic family had to fight with Prince Wei Zhi. Nowadays, official salt in the world basically ranges from 100 yuan to 110 yuan per bucket. This reform is equivalent to taking more than half of the profits of official salt. The official salt system is reformed, and the price is reduced to 50 cents a bucket. How much can the salt farms and salt sellers earn? Zhao Shangsha reacted with hindsight and asked, what about the salt tax? Wei knows, the salt tax is collected from the salt farms. Just like now, the official salt has to pay tax when it goes out to the salt field, they just need to close the salt field well. Zhao Shangsha said, with such a low price and less profit, how much salt tax can we still receive? The emperor said, I don't receive much salt tax now. He said, salt is related to people's livelihood. Since I ascended the throne, I have always wanted to pay less and less, so I don't care much about whether the salt tax is levied or not. The ministers were silent. The emperor glanced at them and said, but if I don't levy taxes, the price of salt must be kept down. Apart from the cost, official salt should not make money, or whose money will be fattened by the money. Just like now, the price of salt is so high, but he receives a tax on salt. While the common people want to eat high-priced salt, he, the emperor, is still financially empty, and he is not happy when he thinks about it. So the emperor made two conditions: if you want to collect tax, the tax must enter the treasury; If you don't collect tax, I can accept it, and the tax part of the salt price must be cut off, so that the people can benefit. Wei Ji said directly, taxes. He said, fix the tax. In the future, unless there is a war, the salt tax cannot be raised, and even if it is raised, there will be a range. The emperor's brows jumped and jumped. He felt that Wei Ji's move was to prevent him from appearing to be a dazed ruler and tax officials' salt. The emperor endured, but did not speak. Wei Ji continued, that's why the minister proposed to open up the official salt market and sell it by merchants. The court could limit the range of salt prices and set up official warehouses at border gates and in salt-deficient areas. In addition to the salt price, in some special places, you can also set the salt farm monopoly. Wei Ji paused and said, isn't Bihai County in Qingzhou a monopoly of salt farms now? If it is handed over to merchants, they will come to buy it. Several adults discussed in a low voice. Kong Jiju, who had been silent all the time, asked, pulling his beard, can the cost of making salt be further reduced? Mr. Wei immediately said, I think it's okay. This is one of the reasons why I propose commercial sales. It does not involve trading. The salt farm can have more experience to study and reduce the cost of salt production. Kong Jiju flipped through Lord Wei's book, and found that the above data was obtained by the prince from Qingzhou last year, and it had been a year since he knew Bai Shan's students. So he closed the book and said, you can go to the letter and ask Bai Shan the cost of making salt now. He said, 50 pennies a bucket. To be honest, the price of salt is still high. Crowd. Even the emperor looked at Kong for offering wine. Kong Jiju said quietly, Your Majesty, now only one state in Qingzhou can replace the salt fields in the south of the Yangtze River. If the method of drying salt is widely spread, this method of making salt can be tested in places where there are salt brins. How much salt? The emperor narrowed his eyes slightly. Kong Jiju said, salt is related to people's livelihood, but like other commodities, it is more expensive and cheaper, but it is different from other commodities, especially in places close to the sea. Sea water is inexhaustible and inexhaustible. Yes, so. Kong Jiju raised his eyes, and Chuo looked at the emperor with a spirit, Your Majesty, since the price of salt is to be stabilized, it is better for the common people to get the greatest benefit. The emperor touched his chin and turned his head to look at Wei Ji excitedly. Wei Ji hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, I have nothing to say, but Your Majesty, the salt tax. He looked at Lu Shangshu. Lu Shangshu was silent and did not speak, and went to see the emperor for a while. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3161. The emperor waved his hand and said, the wealth of the people is the wealth of the country. He thought very openly, the people have money, and even if the treasury does not join hands for a while in case of disaster, they can save themselves, and the effect is the same as putting money in the treasury and then using it for the people, so you don't need to worry about salt. The price is too low, the big deal is that I don't charge the salt tax. The emperor has said so, what else can others say? They all knelt down and saluted, Your Majesty is wise. Kong Jiju raised his head slightly and looked at the prince diagonally opposite. Seeing that there was no dissatisfaction on his face, he nodded slightly in his heart, and was more satisfied with him. After all, Bai Shan was also the prince's companion, and he was the first to agree to the salt administration reform. The corners of Kong Jiju's mouth twitched slightly, feeling that the prince finally had the bearing and mind of being a prince. Since the emperor doesn't even care about taxes, then. The old man Tang proposed eagerly, why not sell the salt and iron monopoly? He said, the establishment of a salt transportation department, which is responsible for the operation of official salt. In this way, the national treasury can not only make profits, but also control the price of salt, so that the benefits are shared with the people. Isn't it better than letting the merchants earn another level? Lu Shangshu was refreshed and nodded, Your Majesty, I think this is a good idea. Wei Ji frowned. He didn't want to set up a salt transportation company, but he wanted to sell it to merchants. Merchants pursued profits. They knew how to save costs better than the Yamen. And as the emperor said, the wealth of the country is not as wealthy as the people, and the merchants also belong to the people. Wei Ji has no prejudice against business, and is even willing to strongly support their development. Old Master Tang is just the opposite. He believes that many evils in the world are caused by profit, and merchants are the most profitable. Although Master Wei said that the government will reduce the price of salt, Old Tang still does not believe in the morality of businessmen. The two of them each explained their views, as well as the advantages and disadvantages of their insistence, and then looked at the emperor and the others, waiting for them to make up their minds. The emperor pondered, What do you Iking think? Kong Jiju said, Let's count the money directly. If the salt and iron monopoly is sold, what is the price that can be sold now, and how much can be put into the warehouse after all the costs? If it is handed over to the merchants, what is the price they can accept? Will there be a big price increase in the future, and what part of the money they make? They must ensure that the merchants make enough profits from the salt, otherwise this policy will definitely not be carried out. In the end, they will still find a way to make up for it from other places, which they absolutely do not allow. The prince sat on the side, distracted slightly, and chose one of the two, that is to say, they all agreed to reform the salt administration, but they had not yet decided how to change it. The prince twitched his lips, feeling that Jiangnan's affairs were almost certain. Sure enough, at the small court meeting the next day, Wei Ji brought up the salt policy reform again. There were very few opponents, and some people felt panic when they saw it. Before they could find out the news, the emperor convened a great court meeting of hundreds of officials, and mentioned the establishment of salt transportation divisions and official salt monopoly in various places. The officials were shocked, and they were all stunned for a while. They didn't expect such a big move in the reform of the salt administration. Before they could regain their senses and discuss it, the emperor asked people to take out a stack of documents and said with a sullen face, This is the impeachment of the salt administration in the south of the Yangtze River. Fold. Salt is related to people's livelihood. As a result, the Jiangnan salt field was not prepared last year. This year, it is time to temporarily break the contract for the official salt of each county. The emperor has been pressing the case for impeaching Jiangnan officialdom and salt administration some time ago. When I came out, I asked Gu Zhong to take out the book and read it one by one, and all the officials who were sitting came out in cold sweat. Even the unrelated Master Tang felt frightened and sat on his seat with his head down and motionless. But the emperor called his name. Master Tang was stagnant in his heart, and after a pause, he stood up from his seat, stepped out of the queue and bowed, This minister is here. The emperor said with a sullen face, Go to Jiangnan again to check the reason why the Jiangnan Salt Works was negligent and escorted all the prisoners back to the capital. The Department of Punishment, the Dali Temple and the Censor's Office Assistant Manager. The bosses of the Ministry of Punishment and the Censor Desk of Dali Temple came out and bowed in response. The emperor then got up and left with a flick of his sleeves. Gu Zhong hurriedly called out Retreat the dynasty and then hurriedly chased after the emperor. As soon as the great court meeting ended, all kinds of news flew out of the capital and went in all directions. The salt administration reform is a major event, and the Jiangnan shock is not a trivial matter, neither of which is trivial. Even Master Tang and Mr. Zhuang hurriedly wrote letters to Bai Shan and Zhou Man, telling them the news of the capital and telling them to pay attention to safety. Master Tang wrote and reacted, and now he and Yang Hesha seem to be the most dangerous, especially Yang Heshu. Master Tang hurriedly ended the letter, handed it over to the servants to send it out, and hurriedly went to the Yang family. Yang Hui just sent the letter out. Hearing that Tang He was coming from the porter, he gritted his teeth and said, "Quickly invite him in." Although he was at odds with his son's political views, he was getting old, and Yang's family had to hand it over to Yang Heshu in the end, and looking at the general situation today, his choice was undoubtedly the right one. So he had to try his best to save his son first. Yang Hui put Tang He in, and the two were locked in the study for a long time to discuss. Finally, when Tang He left, he took Yang Hui's long attendant with him. At this time, Bai Shan, who still knew nothing, was sitting in the lobby of the county government office and looked at the people kneeling at the bottom. He patted the gavel and asked, "Do you still need a sentence by sentence in this county?" The two kneeling people shuddered and kowtowed again and again, "My lord, I know it's wrong, my lord forgive me, and we won't dare to do it again in the future." Bai Shan took the gavel and turned around and asked, "Come and tell me in detail what you did." The two of them lowered their heads and didn't speak for a while. They glanced at each other quietly, and finally the humane kneeling on the left said, "We shouldn't be drunk and reveal the secrets of the county government." "That's right, but we didn't do it on purpose," said the one on the right. "At that time, the merchants were drinking too much, and they went out with a bald grin." Bai Shan lifted his eyelids to look at them. "Does this county seem so fooled? How do you know that the county's finances are empty? We've heard from Fang Xiancheng talking to you occasionally." Bai Shan turned to look at Daji, who was standing not far away. Daji looked at their faces carefully, shook his head at him, and said, "Unless their ears are better than mine, it's impossible to hear." Although Bai Shan was worried about money, he rarely mentioned it to his subordinates. After all, he wanted to appease people, right? Fang Xiancheng is also his subordinate. That's why Bai Shan didn't mention this to him face to face. Every time the good luck was there, because it was a secret, they always paid attention to it. So that anyone can listen. Bai Shan stared at them for a long time, and saw that although they were trembling and sweating, but they were bitten to death. He heard it by accident, not on purpose. Bai Shan called a yamen and said, "Let Dong County go to check the people they have been in contact with in the last 3 months, especially people from other places. By the way, let's check if there are more people in their family recently. Money or objects." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3162. The two were in a cold sweat, their hearts were pounding, and they were very uncomfortable. Both of them live in Bihai County, and they all live in the neighborhood. Living in the depths of the alley, it is clear that even their family can know how many vegetables they bought today. They had accompanied Fang Xiancheng at the Longqi wharf before. Although there were many business travelers and long-term workers, and the personnel were complicated, there were still many long-term workers who obeyed Bai Shan. Not to mention the nearby villagers who set up stalls to sell food. As long as it is the county government's question, they ask a question, and these people can enthusiastically give you the answer to several questions. As long as they have been in contact with interested people, Bai Shan can't find out if they don't believe it. It's just a matter of time. And Bai Shan is rich now. Recently, other salt officials from the provincial governor's house have come to buy salt, so he is not panic at all, and sometimes he has time to play with them. He waved his hand, "Send the person back to the prison." The yamen suppressed people. Wei Dong watched them leave and shook his head. He felt that they were too distracted. Now Bihai County is different from the past. They can still go to Longqi with Fang Xiancheng and have access to such secrets, which is obviously very popular with Fang. Trusted by the county magistrate. In the future, the Longqi wharf will be built without their contribution. Promotion is just around the corner, and I don't know why it is so hard to think about. County Lieutenant Dong quickly found clues. In the county seat, the neighbors on the left and right said that the two families have eaten meat more often than before, and the Sun family bought new clothes last month. Who will make new clothes when it's not a festival? Oh, except for wealthy families like the county magistrate, even the high-ranking officials like him and Fang Xiancheng, the family rarely buys new clothes, let alone the two of them. Have you asked about the origin of their family's money? Lieutenant Dong Xian paused and said, I asked, and everyone in the family said that the two of them made a little money in Longqi by taking advantage of the convenience of the wharf. Bai Shan was very curious, how much is a little? $100,000. Bai Shan clicked his tongue twice, where's the capital? Lieutenant Dong shook his head. Bai Shan snorted, Longqi Wharf is to make money, but even a hen that can lay golden eggs has to be fed, and can lay golden eggs when they are full. Profit. Are there any doubts in their family? Lieutenant Dong nodded, no one doubts it. They don't habitually ask about their outside affairs. Forget it, what about the Longqi Wharf? I checked. They were found by a businessman from another place. They had breakfast together. That person left by boat half a month ago, but... Seeing that he didn't say anything, Bai Shan asked, but what? But it's very strange. When I checked his origin, I found that Bihai County came to Bihai County on the 8th day of May. He left on the 11th day, but did not arrive at Longqi until the 15th day. Bai Shan sat up straight, his face sank, there are 4 days in between. It took 1 day to go from the county seat to Longqi Dingtian. Where did he go in the remaining 3 days? Wei Dongxian shook his head, I have already sent people to investigate along the way, and there is no news yet. He paused and said, Sir, Bihai County is different now. There used to be few people on the official road, and whoever passed by should pay more attention to the villagers along the road, and if you look at the traces on the road, you can see the direction to some extent. Now the people coming and going. There are too many business trips, and some villagers don't recognize people, and if they are similar, they might not recognize them. Bai Shan thought for a while and then said, ask the villagers at the fork along the official road. In 3 days, they didn't go to Longqi, they must have gone elsewhere. There are many business trips, but most of them just go. This is the official road from Longqi to the county seat, so if someone changes the road, it will definitely attract attention. When Dong Xianwei heard this, he immediately followed this direction to look for it. 2 days later, he excitedly ran back to find Bai Shan, Sir, I found it, guess where he went? Bai Shan didn't guess, and asked directly, where? Dong Xianwei thought he was not interesting at all, so guess what? But he still said, he went to Shunping village. Bai Shan was puzzled, why did he go to Shunping village? Lieutenant Dong lowered his voice and said mysteriously, you must have guessed that he is going to see Aunt Chi. Bai Shan raised his eyebrows, his memory has always been good, and the corner of his mouth raised lightly, the fish finally came out. But it's not obvious on the surface. I have asked the people on Zhuangzi carefully. The merchant said that he was passing through Kishu and was entrusted by MRSG's husband's family to deliver letters to her, and then stayed on Guantian Zhuangzi for an extra day before leaving. Bai Shan thought thoughtfully and asked, what has Aunt Chi doing recently? Dong Xianwei's face was indescribable, she's getting married. Bai Shan's eyes widened, with whom? Zhu Liaolang. Since Lieutenant Dong went to investigate, he naturally had to investigate clearly and clearly, especially Aunt Chi was quite special here. She behaved very abnormally when she appeared, so Guantian Zhuangzi was always there. Staring at her. Zhou Man seemed to smell the breath of gossip. He brought a bowl of noodles from the dining room and greeted Captain Dongxian, Secretary Dong, have you eaten lunch? Would you like to have some together? Dong Xianwei hurriedly refused with a smile. Bai Shan glanced at Zhou Man, who was holding his face, and simply stood up, patted the shoulder of Dong County Lieutenant, and said, let's go eat some, and talk while eating. The immediate boss said so Wei Dongxian naturally wanted to follow. The kitchen brought 2 more bowls of noodles and a few plates of side dishes, so Dong Xianwei said while eating, and Zhou Man and Bai Shan pricked up their ears to listen. Then MRSG was very popular when she first entered the Guantian Zhuangzi on the outskirts of the city, especially the brothers of the Zhu family. One of them was named Zhu Erlang. He brought a son, who was a widower, so those in Zhuangzi liked to be matchmakers. Auntie just wanted to introduce them to be together, Dong Xianwei said. Zhu Erlang also picked water for Aunt Chi for a while and helped her with the work for several days, but later because she said that she would not get married again, and I wanted to protect my daughter, so Zhu Erlang didn't go there anymore, and many young people in Zhuangzi stopped. Bai Shan nodded and asked, then what? Because Lord Zhou promised that their mother and daughter could go to Yishantang to learn weaving and embroidery, they went to Yishantang for a long time last year, but Dong Xianwei said, the 2 of them are in the school. There is no talent in this area, and I gave up after learning for a while. It should be said that he is very incompetent. This is what surprised Dong Xianwei. He felt that as a woman, he could sew and mend a little bit, but according to his investigation, Aunt Chi's mother and daughter are worthy of being mother and daughter, and they have no talent in this regard. Anyway, they can't continue to learn, they can only work hard in Guanatian Zhuangzi. Because they didn't go to Yishantang to study, they were assigned to Shunping village last November, said Dong Xianwei, coughing lightly, then the Zhu family were also assigned here. Because there are not many things to do in winter, Zhu Liaolang and Aunt Chi's mother and daughter are divided into a group of composting. Anyway, they are talking about marriage now. There is one more chapter, it will be very late, everyone go to bed first. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3163. Zhou Man listened with relish, and finished eating the noodles while reading the story. She took out the handkerchief and wiped her mouth, and asked Bai Shan, are you going to ask Aunt Chi? Bai Shan nodded and said, I want to go, how about you? Zhou Man sighed and said, I think so too, but I don't have time. I will see the patient in the past 2 days, and then I will go to Qingzhou City. By the way, I am afraid that I will be on a business trip for a few days. She said, I want to live in Qingzhou City for 2 days, and then go to Shaoguan County to see the place. It may take 5 or 6 days to come and go. Because of the vaccination, Zhou Man is very busy this year, and there are still patients in the medical department, so it is not easy at all. Fortunately, she has several apprentices, otherwise she must be even more busy. After listening to the gossip, Zhou Man got up regretfully, and was about to go to the medical office when he heard Bai Shan and Dong Xianwei say, send someone to Zhuangzi to bring Aunt Chi and her daughter, and this county will ask her at the county office. Zhou Man couldn't help giving him a thumbs up. Bai Shan grabbed her thumb, I originally thought that if you were free, I would just take the opportunity to take you out to relax. Since I'm not free, I'd better ask someone to ask questions and save time. Bai Shan is also not free. Zhou Man knew that he would not miss the excitement and went to work happily. The sun was shining, and she wore a hood when she went out. After a short walk, she sweated when she arrived at the hospital, which was very uncomfortable. As a result, when she arrived at the county office, she even met someone who brought her firewood. When the person who came carrying the firewood saw Zhou Man, he quickly put down the firewood, picked up his pole and ran away, and disappeared after a while. Zhou Man. Although the medical department does need firewood, she is really not feeling well when she sees the piles of firewood in the summer and thinks of the fire. Old Man Fei, the gatekeeper, couldn't stand it either. He dragged the firewood into the yard and said to Zhou Man, Sir, this is the 3rd person to deliver firewood today, and the backyard is almost full of piles. Zhou Mandeo, most of them don't recognize the words on the announcement. Next time someone comes to deliver firewood, you can tell them not to send it again. Oh, these words are useless at all, Old Man Fei said. I haven't said much in the past 2 days, but they still sent it. Joe Man thought for a while and said, then you say that the backyard can't hold it, and if you send it back, the firewood can only be thrown out. It's not winter, although the medical department needs firewood to cook rice, water, and medicine on weekdays, but the demand is not so much. Since last winter, cured patients have sent firewood to her one after another, especially the patients who have lived here. Directly let the medical department save the expenditure of firewood. Joe Man stepped into the medical office, and the patients who had already received the number immediately stood in front of the consultation room and lined up according to the data on their number. Dr. Xiao, who was sitting in the consulting room next door, kept his 3 heads up and down, and immediately woke up when he heard the movement outside, and quickly got up and walked out. Sir, you are here. Joe Man nodded to them, stopped when he caught a glimpse of the marks on their faces, struggled for a while and said, it's been hard for you to get pox during this time. I just looked at it, and there are still 8 patients, not too many. I can read it myself. If you are tired, you can go back to rest first. After thinking about it, she will be in the medical department for the past 2 days, and it is hard enough for them to follow her to do acne vaccinations during this time. So Joe Man said to them sympathetically, why don't you rest for 2 days, and come back in 2 days? Although the 3 wanted to nod their heads, they still gritted their teeth and refused, still firmly refused. Although I really want to rest, after all, when I am old, my body just wants to rest. But thinking of what they had learned during this time, the 3 still gritted their teeth and refused. I used to see that a 1-year appointment was a long time, but now it seems that a year is clearly very short, and the things that can be learned are very limited, and I regret it a little. Just thinking about it, Joe Man had already entered the consultation room, and the 3 of them squatted down in the corridor to see the patients and lined up one by one. If the female patient goes in, the 3 of them will keep their eyes still. Although they are very curious, the female patient does not like them to see the doctor, so it is better not to make each other uncomfortable. If a male patient goes in, the 3 of them go in together, standing behind Joe Man and watching her diagnose and prescribe. For most common diseases, she told them about the pulse and then prescribed them. Later, if they wanted to see the prescription, they could ask her for it, and if they had any questions, they could ask her. For some special diseases, she not only diagnoses the pulse by herself, but also asks 3 people to take turns to listen to the pulse, and then discuss the condition and then prescribe it. Every time they encounter such a patient, they benefit a lot. Even for common diseases, they can learn a lot from Joe Mankai's prescription and effect. Joe Man went to the backyard after reading the patients seeking medical treatment today. Now only Hu Dalan's mother and son live in the backyard, and the other patients have been discharged. In fact, Mother Hu's illness could have been discharged as early as March, but Joe Man knew that their life would be difficult after they returned, so he did not drive them away. Mother Hu knew that she should leave after she stopped taking the medicine, but looking at her increasingly capable son and daughter, she didn't want to return to the Hu family, so she consciously did some work for the medical department, such as drying the herbs, cutting medicines, cleaning things, boiling medicines, etc. Because of this, Joe Man turned a blind eye to let them live. Anyway, Hu Dalan and Hu Xiaomei happened to be working and apprentices in the medical office, and they also needed a place to live. Zhenggu was locked in the room making penicillin. When he heard the voice and looked back, he got up quickly. Master. Joe Man nodded and asked, how is it? Zhenggu said, very well, Master. Now that the penicillin pharmacy can produce it on a large scale, why do we have to work so hard to make it ourselves? Joe Man, if you are idle, you will be idle, so I will make some spare parts. Although the pharmacy does it with little effort, it will take a long time to get it from the capital to here. With this effort, we can make it ourselves. Anyway, this prescription is hers, and the imperial physician's office has not prohibited her from making it herself, so she can make it herself. Zhenggu put the prepared liquid medicine into a bottle, filled in the date, and placed it on the shelf. Zhou Man looked at it in his hand and said, if only it could be made edible. Zhenggu tilted his head, is it okay? Zhou Man waved his hand and said, I'll check and think about it when I look back, but this is not important for now. I asked you to prepare for it. We will go to Qingzhou in 2 days. Zhou Mandao, when I go to Qingzhou, I have to go to Shaoguan County. Mr. Qian has already gone one step ahead to find a house suitable for the medical department. We just made the decision in the past. Zhenggu responded, knowing that Zhou Man brought him with the intention of cultivating him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3164. When Aunt Chi and her daughter were taken to the county office, their faces were all white. Aunt Chi even shivered and could only barely stand still. The yaman who led them here looked at Shang Dongxianwei's condemning gaze, and immediately said, I didn't bully them, I just said that the adults wanted to see them, and they were scared like this. Lieutenant Dongxian waved his hand and said, forget it, bring people in. Your road is too slow. It's already noon. Dongxianwei brought the pale mother and daughter to the lobby. Bai Shanke finished the 2 cases and settled the disputes between the neighbors. Seeing Aunt Chi's mother and daughter, he closed the file in his hand. Aunt Chi was so frightened in her heart that she fell to the ground with a thud before she could reach her. Bai Shan, who was about to speak. This move was too fast, making him useless. Aunt Chi's daughter knelt down immediately, bowing her head and shivering. Because she wasn't that old, Bai Shan swallowed the words that came to his lips, and said indifferently, get up and talk. Aunt Chi knelt down and did not dare to get up. Bai Shan frowned, got up and walked down the hall, stretched out his hand to help Miss Lu up, and seeing that her lips were so white that there was no blood, he knew that she was also quite frightened, so he said, Madam will come back to eat at this time too. Now, does this county remember that you were the official Tianzhuangzi arranged by your wife before? The two said in a low voice. Bai Shan said, let's go then, I'll lead you to greet Madam. Aunt Chi and her daughter looked at each other, confused, didn't they arrest them for questioning? How to go to the backyard of the county government? Bai Shan led them back to the backyard, and Lieutenant Dong immediately followed. In the backyard, Mrs. Zheng and Mrs. Jian were playing in the garden with their 2 children. Mingda was sitting by the side reading a book, while Lan Xian was sitting by the side doing needlework. She looked up at the 2 children from time to time. The month is not too small, the belly is bulging, and I can't sit for a long time, but I also don't stand and walk for a long time. I have to stand up and walk twice in a while. She put down the sewing basket in her hand and got up when she saw Bai Shan brought a group of people in, and immediately said, little uncle is back. Mrs. Zheng and Mrs. Jian turned their heads and looked over, have the yamen business been settled? The 2 looked curiously at the person behind him. Bai Shan pays great attention to the separation of the front and backyards. Except for Mr. Kui, his staff member, other subordinate colleagues rarely come to the backyard to discuss matters. Bai Shan nodded to them and found a random reason, I'll bring them back when Manbao wants to see them later. Several people looked at Aunt Chi's mother and daughter, and when they saw that their faces were a little pale, they thought they were sick and came to see Zhou Man for medical treatment. I'm busy, I'm afraid I won't be back until later. There is now a grandmother at home, Zhou Man has stopped feeding, and the milk has also stopped taking medicine, but perhaps it is because of the nature of mother and daughter. Seeing Zhou Man very happy, he stretched out his hand to hug him. Joe Man also likes to hold her, so whenever she has time, she runs back from the medical office to hold the child. Today is also the case. As soon as the patient finished reading, she handed over the finishing work to the students and apprentices, and she spread her legs and ran home. As soon as I got home, I hugged my daughter who was giggling with her arms outstretched, kissed her left and right cheeks, and then weighed. Sister-in-law, is she gaining weight again? Little Qian, nonsense, I haven't seen her for a morning, how can she get fat? Zhengxi, that's right, she can understand her words now, don't say anything about her being fat, she won't be happy. Bai Jingxing didn't look unhappy at all, her legs were firmly pinching her mother, and her hands were still holding Joe Man's neck firmly, as if she was afraid that she would disappear again in the blink of an eye. Xiao Qian didn't bring anyone over twice, so she was a little anxious. Bai Shan brought a few people back and said he wanted you to take a look. I don't know if they are sick. Mingden knew more, rolled up the book, walked down the corridor with a smile and said, it's not the patient, it's Aunt Qi and her daughter. Joe Man's eyes lit up, and he turned around holding the child, then let's go have a look. Mingda followed, and asked the maid to carry her son. Although Zhengxi and Xiao Qianxi didn't know what was going on, but it didn't seem to be a bad thing, so they stopped asking, but raised their voices and asked, what do you want for lunch? Joe Man said casually, whatever. Mingda didn't have too high demands on what to eat, so he didn't say anything and walked beside Joe Man in silence. Joe Man asked curiously, why did you bring it to the backyard instead of asking questions in the front yard? Mingda said, I think they were quite frightened, especially the little lady, her face was pale. After all, she was young. Bai Shan probably didn't want to frighten the child. Joe Man nodded and entered the hall with Mingda. Bai Shan was sitting and drinking tea. Madame Qi and Madame Lu had recovered, and felt that what they had done should not have been discovered, otherwise they would not have been brought to the backyard and treated so gently. Seeing Joe Man coming in, the mother and daughter, who were a little nervous, got up immediately, but they didn't see the weakness and thick skin of last year. Joe Man glanced at their faces, smiled and said to Mrs. Lu, you are much taller than last year. I haven't asked you, how old are you? Miss Lu quietly raised her head and glanced at Joe Man before whispering, it's almost 9 years old. Joe Man was surprised, and after looking at her seriously, he said, good boy, you look so good. The tone rose, without a trace of ridicule, it was a real compliment. Madame Lu's face instantly flushed red, and she asked almost inaudibly, don't you think I'm too big? I don't think so, Joe Man was still envious. It would be great if my daughter could be as tall as you in the future. Every time she goes to a big court meeting, when she stands up and salutes, she is submerged in the crowd. The emperor can't see her even when he is standing on the high platform. Unless everyone sits down, she can barely catch the eye. We're in tears. Joe Man looked at her with shining eyes, then turned to look at Aunt Qi, who seemed weak. It's good to be as tall as her father. But there should be some dietary reasons. What do you usually like to eat? Miss Lu gradually relaxed and started talking about what she liked to eat. Joe Man found that she ate a lot of pasta, so he said to Mingda, when the children are older, they can eat complementary food, and we will also make noodles for them. Mingda nodded after thinking about it. She remembered that Sister Chang Yu also ate a lot of pasta and looked very good. Joe Man took the little lady Lu to gossip for a long time, and when she saw that she was completely relaxed, he handed over the child in his arms to Mei, and said with a smile, help me take the 2 children to the dining room to see if I have you. If you like the food you like, tell my sister-in-law what you often eat, and we will feed the children according to your recipe in the future, so that they will grow better. Madame Lu went away happily. Mei and the palace maid withdrew with their 2 children, only a few adults were left in the hall, and the atmosphere slowly froze again. The bright smile on Aunt Qi's face slowly disappeared, her heart lifted, and she realized that something was wrong. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3165. Joe Man took a sip of water from the teacup, and then looked up at Aunt Chi. Aunt Chi was also raising her head to look at Joe Man. Their eyes met. Joe Man's mouth twitched slightly, and she looked at her quietly, with a warm face, but Aunt Chi swallowed nervously, her knees softened, and the whole body went soft. The man slipped from the chair and fell to the ground, kneeling on the ground. Joe Man's expression didn't change much, and he took another sip of tea before putting down the cup. In the quiet room, the sound of the teacup on the table was particularly loud, and Aunt Chi couldn't help shaking. Bai Shan couldn't help but wonder, "You don't have the guts to look at it, how can you have the guts to do such a thing?" Before that, Bai Shan had never seen Aunt Chi, but heard Joe Man mention it, saying that she was calm and composed when she stopped the car and asked her to take the little lady Lu, but her performance was not very good. Full of loopholes. Not to mention that there is also a Mingda who grew up in the deep palace next to her. Her thoughts are transparent in Mingda's eyes. Mingda and Joe Man don't care about others playing tricks in front of them. As long as there is no malice, they are willing to accept their scheming for a better life. If they can help, they will help them, and if they can't, they will refuse. It's just that when Aunt Chi appeared, they felt the sense of disobedience that forced them, so people stared at her. Aunt Chi shivered. With a straight face, Bai Shan said solemnly, "Speak." Aunt Chi bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. "Please forgive me, slave is forced." Bai Shan said, "Let's start from the beginning, this county is all heirs." Both Joe Man and Mingda were ready to listen. Aunt Chi paused for a while before saying, "This slave is from Kizhu." They know this. After Joe Man and Mingda suspected that she had bad intentions, Bai Shan asked someone to go to Kizhu to check, which is not far from Qingzhou anyway. But the fact found is that their mother and daughter are indeed from Kizhu, and the information she gave is not false. Aunt Chi wiped her tears and said, "My man died early, leaving us orphans and widows. She is not a son. My husband's family and clan always dislike us and want me to remarry. I didn't want to, so they called my mother's family to tie me back." Aunt Chi said, "My husband and I only have one daughter, how could I be willing to leave her alone and remarry?" Just when the trouble was the worst, there was a passing by. The merchant from here rescued me and gave me a little money to bring my daughter to Bihai County. She paused and lowered her voice. He asked the slave to come to Bihai County to inquire about some news. In the future, he only needs to pass the news to him. After 3 years, he will give us 100 taels of mother and daughter. Aunt Chi said, 100 taels, if you find a village, you can build a small courtyard, and with the remaining money, you can hire a son-in-law for my daughter, enough for our mothers to live a lifetime. Bai Shan asked, "What information does he want to inquire about?" "It's just that I must enter the weaving workshop, and I will take over the job of delivering clothes to the salt field, and I will talk about the rest later." Aunt Chi hurriedly said, "But I can't enter the weaving workshop, and I don't have any news for him." "How many times has the merchant contacted you?" 3 times, but only once in person." Aunt Chi hurriedly said, "The slave didn't say anything. I have been working in Zhuangzi, I don't know anything about Zhaifang and the salt works, and they didn't ask me anything at first." The other party didn't seem to expect Aunt Chi to be of much use. After she came to Bihai and settled down, someone contacted her quietly. "I heard that she couldn't enter the weaving workshop or the salt field, so she didn't say anything when she could only stay in the village." "What, just let her continue to work on Zhuangzi, so as not to make people suspicious." The second contact was her initiative, because at that time she was assigned to Shunping village. She was actually worried, and she no longer wanted to continue doing this. Aunt Chi wiped her tears and said, "The Lord is kind to our mother and daughter. It not only gave us a place to live, but also made us earn money. I already wanted to stay here from my heart, so I went to that person and said no done. But he threatened me that if I didn't obey me, he would not only tell the adults about me, but also let us die without knowing it. Slaves are really scared, so they don't dare to speak out, Aunt Chi said. But after we went to Shunping village, no one came to look for me. I won't come back to the county. At that time, Aunt Chi felt that it was good to be transferred to Shunping village. As long as she never came to the county seat, and the person in the county never came to her, then this incident would have never happened. Bai Shan and Zhou Man were both stunned that there are such innocent people in this world. Bai Shan finally knew why she wanted to marry Zhu Liaolang, and she felt it was all right. Bai Shan asked, "What did the merchant personally say to you last time? You can't add or subtract anything." Aunt Chi told Bai Shan exactly what the merchant said at the time, and she could even remember his expression at the time. Bai Shan and Zhou Man raised their eyebrows, and even Mingda looked up at Aunt Chi in surprise. No wonder the merchants chose Aunt Chi to do meticulous work. This is indeed a rare skill. The merchant came to Aunt Chi not to ask about the salt field, but to ask about everything she knew about Bihai County, including some rumors about Bai Shan Zouman, the situation of Guantian Zhuangzi, etc. As long as Aunt Chi knew about it, he asked. But MRSG said, but the slave didn't dare to tell him everything, he just said that the slave has been working in the village and can't go out, so I don't know much, I only talked about farming in the village, other things didn't say anything. Bai Shan asked, I heard that he stayed in Zhuangzi for one more day. What did he do that day? I didn't do anything, I just wandered around in the fields, and I asked someone to inquire about the hired workers here, and Chi said, I don't think he trusts me anymore, so I asked the people in Zhuangzi for news. Bai Shan frowned, where does he wander around? Aunt Chi said, it's the place where rice and wheat are planted. Oh, we were harvesting wheat at the time, so he went to see us harvesting wheat. This year, the official fields in Bihai County are all new wheat varieties, and many villages also plant some new wheat varieties, and the harvest is good. But the most important thing is that this year, new rice seeds have been planted in the official fields of Bihai County. Due to the limited number of seeds, not all of them have been planted, but it is also guaranteed that at least 10 acres of fields in each village are planted with new rice seeds. All of Bai Shan's farms used new rice seeds. Bai Shan looked at Aunt Chi with deep eyes and asked, how is the rice in the fields this year? Aunt Chi was stunned for a moment, not knowing why she brought this up suddenly, but she still said, although it was a little dry some time ago, it's not bad. Nikan is heading well. Bai Shan raised his eyebrows, looked at Zhou Man, and asked, who is responsible for the new rice fields in Zhuangzi? The steward is personally responsible. Only then did Bai Shan nodded in satisfaction, and felt a little relieved. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3166. Aunt Chi was still kneeling on the ground. She stopped crying now, but her eyes were red. She glanced at Bai Shan a little nervously, then looked at Zhou Man, begging, please forgive me, even though I came here with an impure mind, but I really haven't done anything bad since I came. Bai Shan frowned and interrupted her, who is the person who contacted you in that county, and how did you all get in touch? When Aunt Chi begged for mercy, she could only continue to confess. Bai Shan looked at Lieutenant Dong who was standing beside him. Dong Xianwei, who was listening with gusto, was taken aback for a moment, then he quickly clasped his fists and said, I'm going to get someone from the humble post. Too bad the person is no longer there. When Wei Dong came back, Zhou Man and the others had already eaten lunch, and were hesitating whether to take a nap. When they heard the report that Wei Dong was coming, the two dismissed the idea of taking a nap and went to see him first. Dong Xianwei said, it's a guy in a restaurant. I heard that he came to be a relative in September last year. He didn't find any relatives, so he worked as a guy in the restaurant and left a few months ago. Find someone. Bai Shan said to Aunt Chi, who still insisted on kneeling but didn't get up. Congratulations, they gave up on you. Aunt Chi looked at him blankly. For a while she was not sure whether he was congratulating him sincerely or pretending to congratulate him. Bai Shan is naturally sincere, but when he said this with a flat face, it was hard for people to think that he was sincere. He said, "This matter is for the time being, and I will not investigate the past. Since you have already settled in Bihai County and plan to have a biological child, you will be a citizen of this county in the future. I hope you can abide by the law and be a virtuous person. Wife and good mother, this county will never tolerate such a thing again." Aunt Chi immediately assured, "Don't worry, my lord, I don't dare any more." Bai Shan raised his eyebrows, claiming that he had improved quickly enough to see the wind turn the rudder. "If someone over there comes to you in the future, you should immediately report it to your steward. The other party has removed all the contacts, although it is unlikely to find her again, but what if?" Moreover, Bai Shan felt that Aunt Chi should not be the only one who buried the nails in Bihai County. She just found them temporarily. It works best, and it doesn't cause much loss if it doesn't work. If he really regarded him as a strong enemy, the opponent must have more than this means. Bai Shan asked Aunt Chi to take Auntie Chi down and let their mother and daughter meet, but he left Wei Dongxian and instructed, "I ordered to go down, and let all the villagers and villagers pay attention, starting from June last year. Up to now, if there are any suspicious people around, we must investigate carefully." "Yes." After Lieutenant Dong left, Bai Shan looked at Zhou Man, reached out and put the strands of hair scattered from her forehead behind her head, and said solemnly, "You go out this time with some more people, bring Daji with you, you also bring the guards at home, and I will send you a few yamen from the county government. Zhou Man, it takes a lot of money for so many people to travel on business. Bai Shandao, don't take the public account, spend our own money." When Zhou Man heard it, he didn't feel distressed, nodded in response, and asked curiously, "Are you afraid they will deal with me?" Bai Shan said with a sullen face, "Just in case, Man Bao, you are my life. There are too many people who know this. If something happens to you, I will go crazy. Those people have gone crazy for that little money, no one knows what they will do, I can't take the risk." Bai Shan stretched out his arms to hug her, took her into his arms, and said solemnly, "I live in Bihai County very hard. Safe, but you are not." Zhou Man also reached out and hugged him, comforting him, "Don't worry, no one can hurt me." She lowered her voice and said, "You forget me, there are other people by my side." Bai Shan thought of his little father-in-law, his body froze, and his arms hugging Zhou Man loosened slightly. He leaned into her ear and asked in a low voice, "Is little father-in-law here?" Zhou Man opened his eyes to tell the truth, and said decisively, "Not here." Keek. Bai Shan breathed a sigh of relief, and the whole person relaxed. He hugged her and swayed, "Then be careful, even if I get hurt, I feel very distressed." Zhou Man felt that he was unfounded. This is Qingzhou, not Jiangnan. Bai Shan thought so too, but he always hoped to be prepared. He never saw him call Yin or Bai Erlang and the others to live in the backyard of the county government. Zhou Man was very relieved to hand over the medical office to the 3 mature apprentices and Cao Yuxuan, and then took Zhenggu and Wei Man to Qingzhou City. They stopped in Qingzhou City for 2 days. Zhou Man handed Wei Man over to Wen Tiandong, and said to him, "She has been trying to prescribe independently for the past few months. With her here, you will give it to the female patient. It is also more convenient to see a doctor, you usually check her pulse case more often, give pointers to her, if there is an undecidable condition, either send someone to send me a letter, or wait for me to return to Qingzhou." Wen Tiandong replied yes and watched Zhou Man leave. The sun was too big and it was too hot. Zhou Man didn't ride a horse, but sat in the carriage, which blocked the sunlight. The window was opened, and the wind was blowing in, so it was cooler. Zhenggu and Zhou Man sat in the same car. He closed the documents in his hand and asked, "Master, is the medical office of Shaoguan County going to be entrusted to me to build it?" Zhou Man thought for a while and then shook his head. "I plan to hand it over to Wei Man and Cao Yuxuan, and you will help me." She said, "Both you and Wen Tiandong have established a medical department by themselves, but Wei Man and Cao Yuxuan have not. Let them try it out. I also want to see their abilities. If it is suitable, it can be managed by a medical department, and if it is not suitable, you can become a doctor in the medical department, which is also very good." Zhenggu nodded. "Zhou Mandao, you have more experience than Wen Tiandong, and your medical skills are better than him. I am thinking of handing it over to you or him by the Qingzhou medical office in the future." She said, "Qingzhou is a pilot project, and its relationship with the local yamen will be a template for the relationship between the local medical office and the local yamen in the future, so it is particularly important. There is no county where Baishan is located, and all of them are integrated into the medical office in the prefecture. I want to see how you guys manage it." He added, "And managing the medical department under your jurisdiction is only the most basic responsibility. In addition, we must improve medical skills. Don't forget the original intention of building the medical department." Zhenggu opened his mouth wide, feeling that the pressure on his back instantly increased. After doing so much, his salary seems to be a little low. "Master, can our salary be raised a little bit?" Zhou Man thought for a while and said, "Make your grades first, and then I will apply for a try." The two were talking lively when the carriage stopped suddenly, and both of them could not help but fall forward. Fortunately, they grabbed the wall of the carriage in time and did not fall. Zhou Man looked out the window and asked Daji, "What's wrong?" Daji stared at the road ahead. A giant tree fell in the middle of the road, blocking the way. Zhou Man was stunned when he heard the words, and stuck out his head to look forward. Dajida immediately took a step forward, which perfectly blocked Zhou Man. She could see the front, but people outside would definitely not be able to see Zhou Man, let alone assassination. "Zhou Man, that tree wouldn't still say Zhou Man died under this tree." "Daji." Zhenggu was taken aback and said hurriedly, "Master, how can you say such unlucky words? Isn't this a tree? Just let someone move it away. See you tomorrow, good night." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3167. But Daji didn't let anyone come forward. Although the yamen were about to move, but the guards were on the line, they didn't move. In fact, they also think that this is just a tree that is usually fallen down. If you move it away, why should you be so careful? Daji was already frowning and looking into the woods on both sides. He was hesitating whether to send someone to investigate first, when Zhou Man had already lifted the curtain and jumped out of the car. Daji was startled. "Miss." Zhou Man waved his hand and said, "It's okay, I'll take a look. I'm very curious about how the tree fell." She had already asked Keek, and there was no one around. Zhou Man took Daji and a group of guards to look, and saw that the roots of the trees were still connected together, and the soil was rising on the ground, as if it had been blown down by the wind, but Zhou Man squatted down and took a closer look, and still saw the felling. But the traces were destroyed again. Daji also saw it and frowned. It seems that this trace is not long ago. Since it is not an ambush, who would do this? Zhou Man clapped his hands and said, "No matter, move the tree away and let's go." They moved the tree away, mounted their horses and left, and half an hour later, they encountered a second fallen tree. Daji and the guards became nervous again. Joe Man. Joe Man was furious and waved, "Move away." Daji didn't listen, but first asked people to check the situation of the mountains and forests on both sides, and only after confirming that there was no danger would they move the trees. Then he continued like before, this time after walking for less than half an hour. Joe Man opened his eyes, lifted the curtain and glanced out, then waved to Daji, "Daji, Daji, I guess there is another tree in front of you, do you believe it?" "Do not believe." "Daji, what does the lady want to say?" "Humph, let's split our troops and bring my horse here." Daji frowned, "Where are you going? You can't take the risk yourself." Daji will not refute Joe Man's inference, because in terms of intelligence, he is far inferior to them. Although he doesn't understand who is so stupid. If you want to ambush, you can ambush once, but what about 3 ambush? The speed of the car gradually slowed down, and Daji still gave the horse to Joe Man, and then ordered 7 best guards in Kung Fu, and said to them, "The lady wants to go into the mountains to collect medicine, we will follow." He called another guard, whispered to him a few times, and then patted him on the shoulder and raised his voice, "You just go to Shaoguan County, find a suitable place to camp in the evening, and we will find you." Joe Man called Zhenggu, and the 10 people rode into the mountains together. Except for listening to Zhenggu, no one doubted Joe Man's purpose. Because she has this habit. Sometimes when she walks well, she turns to the other side to dig grass. Not only the guards of the Bai family, but also the Yamen in Bihai County are used to it, so she doesn't doubt it. They just need to meet in front. Joe Man turned his horse into the forest, followed Keek's instructions, and said to Daji, "Actually, you are the best in the team. If you are not there, they may doubt it." "Daji," the Lord said, "I have to follow you all the time, never leaving." He said, "Doubt is doubt. If there is an ambush, the result is the same whether they do anything." Only then did the guards feel that something was wrong, and they all asked, "What ambush?" Daji said, "Take your swords and obey orders later." After a pause, Daji continued, "Let's look at the enemy's situation first. If there are too many people, we won't make a sound. We will protect the lady first, and then we will fight if we can beat it." One of the guards first glanced at the serious Joe Manke and said, "Brother Daji, are you thinking too much? Who will ambush us? Be careful, we have already encountered 2 trees blocking the road today. Isn't that the wind blowing down? If you ambush the first tree, it's the best place to ambush, right? Why do you use trees to block the road again and again?" Daji couldn't figure it out, so he said, "Maybe stupid people think too much." These words made Zhenggu, who had never thought of it, feel a little better, but he couldn't help but ask, "Why not a smart person?" "Because their purpose is to ambush, usually we can't come up with such a strategy, and we can't see through it, but as smart as a lady, we can see through it, so he can't deal with smart people with such a strategy, isn't he a fool? A normal person, like them, can't think of such a strategy, a smart person, like Joe Man, can see through it at a glance, which means that the other party can't rely on both." Zhenggu and the guards were dazed by Daji, and they didn't realize that something was wrong for a while, they just nodded. Only Joe Man looked at Daji and couldn't help laughing out loud. They went up the mountain, then went down for a while, tied their horses in the forest, and was led by Joe Man. Not to mention the other guards, Daji couldn't tell the direction, but soon they could vaguely hear the sound of carriages and horses stepping on the road. One of the guards looked down the mountain and saw their motorcade slowly approaching. Before he had time to be happy, he glanced to the side and saw a tree across the road. "Guard! Did the lady really guess it?" The other guards were also about to speak when Joe Man snorted to signal them to be quiet, and then pointed down the hillside. Everyone looked in the direction she pointed, and it took a long while to see vaguely among the clumps of weeds. "People! It's human," It looks like a human's leg. The guards swallowed their saliva and turned their heads to look at Daji. Is there really someone in ambush? The guards were the first to suspect Dying Village and Xiaojing Village, and lowered their voices and said, could it be the remnants of last year's gangsters? Didn't Master Lang arrest everyone? Could it be their family's revenge? Zhou Man glanced at them sympathetically and whispered, let go of your brains. Daji also gave them a sideways look, don't make random guesses, see how many people there are. If you can beat them, we will arrest everyone, if we can't beat them, we will leave. Then what about the people under the mountain? Don't worry, the lady is not in the car, they have their own way to escape. Daji lowered his voice and said, Luda, your feet are light, go and see how many people are ambushed in this section. Zhou Man knew it, but it wasn't easy to say it directly. He could only stare at the grass for a long time, and waited for Luda to come back and report, I can't see clearly, but there should be 7 or 8, and I found that near the roadside. There were people behind the tree, but I didn't dare to get close, not sure how many. Zhou Man whispered, I looked at it, there are at least 10 people in that clump of grass, and there are 5 people further down. If there is an ambush, there should be ambush on both sides, and the same number is 30 people. Zhenggu was surprised, Master, your eyes are so good that you can see through so many trees and lush grass. Of course, Zhou Man whispered, you don't need to see people, you can infer from the shape of the trees and grass. Although she didn't know how to infer, or even whether she had this knowledge, it was always right to say this first, and to confuse people first. The guards, like Zhenggu, looked at Zhou Man with admiration. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 3168. Zhou Man raised his head and raised his chest, very proud. Daji broke the atmosphere and lowered his voice, then let's go. Zhou Man blinked, hurriedly grabbed Daji, and whispered, everyone is coming to the door, no matter what, they will be caught. Daji frowned and said, Miss, we have too few people. Compared with your safety, these people are not worth mentioning. He said, let's go back first, transfer troops and horses and then arrest people, as long as they are within Qingzhou, they will not be able to escape. Run away and run away, is it still important to have Zhou Man's life? Anyway, let's persuade people to go back now. Zhenggu also reacted, nodding again and again, safety is the most important thing. The guards also wanted to leave, mainly because there were more people on the other side than them, and they didn't know how good they were, but it was more important to save their lives. Zhou Man took out a bottle in his sleeve for a long time, finally closed his eyes, took out a bottle after a long while, and then took out another bottle. Zhou Man showed them the 3 medicine bottles and whispered confidently, do you know what medicine this is? Everyone shook their heads together. Daji glanced down the mountain, and said in a low voice, ma'am, they have seen the tree blocking the road stop, and without my message, they will stay still, and there is not much time left for us. So if you say it, just say it. Zhou Man immediately speeded up his speech, this bottle of medicine is itchy medicine, if you sprinkle it, they will itch all over, no matter how strong the willpower is, there will be no combat effectiveness, this bottle is stinky medicine powder, people smell it. After that, I will feel weak all over, dizzy and vomit, this bottle is even more ruthless, it is duanxusin, which is a poison that I have only made occasionally in the past 2 years. Once the blood is disconnected, people will bleed to death from the 7 orifices. Everyone's eyes widened. Zhou Man took back duanxusan and asked them with 2 bottles of medicine, which bottle do you want to deal with them? In fact, if it's not hard to find a reason, she still has a potion made of incense sticks here. After burning it and throwing it among them, even if the place is empty, it will not make people dizzy, but it can definitely make people feel dizzy. Some of these things were prepared before going to the western regions, and some were made secretly by her interest after returning from the western regions. It's a pity that she didn't have the chance to use it after she made it. After all, once this kind of poisonous drug spills out, it is very easy to cause trouble, so because Shi Zhuolang and Xiang Mingxiu often go out for business, she will give them a little self-defense. Every time they used it up, and when she reached out to Zhou Man to ask for it, she would ask them in detail how they used it and who it was for. Daji looked at the bottle of stinky medicinal powder and made a decisive decision: use this. The other guards looked at the bottle of itching powder and whispered, this is safer, it's just itchy. Use stinky powder. If we accidentally inhale it, wouldn't we have to vomit and dizzy? Daji immediately asked, is there an antidote? Zhou Man pondered, I can give you a needle to relieve it, don't worry too much, we have a lot of medicinal materials in our medicine box, we can prepare prescriptions, and the residual poison can be removed when we get there. Daji saw that the bandits in ambush below were ready to move. He took the smelly powder first, took out a handkerchief to tie his nose and mouth, and ordered 3 people to go together. The rest continued to stay here to protect Zhou Man. Seeing that Daji gave her a warning look, Zhou Man could only squat down and watch the play honestly. She flipped through Keek's space again, and said to Keek, there are still too few poisons to use, and it's not very convenient to use. Unfortunately, Mr. Mo is not very good at this. This is all based on my words. I figured it out, alas, it's a pity no one taught me. Keek, if Mr. Mo was good at this, Zhou Man would never have the chance to see him in the encyclopedia. The 6 of them squatted on the mountain and watched Daji and the 3 of them touch it quietly, but he was still a step behind, and the bandits who were ambushing behind the tree below had already jumped out to stop the convoy that had been reluctant to move forward to move the tree. The bandit who was ambushed in the grass also got up, but instead of rushing down, he ducked and looked down the mountain, talking, Grandma, 2 trees have already been moved in front of me, why didn't they move to this tree? Did they suspect that we were lying in ambush on the mountain? Then why don't you turn around and walk, but stop on the road without moving? Don't be long-winded, what's the use of talking about this now, have the people who didn't look at us already rushed down? The man said, all eyes are wide open, if the people in the car come out or turn around and run, they must be if you want to keep her, if you can catch her alive, you will kill her if you can't. Strange, why don't the people in the car get down? They are about to start, Mr. Fu, do we want to get down? The opposite side has already rushed down. Before they could discuss it, a figure stepped on the tree and flew over their heads quickly. Everyone was startled and looked up immediately. Before they could see the figure clearly, a stench suddenly hit their nostrils. Everyone subconsciously held their breath. After a while, they let go. Once they let go, they couldn't help taking a deep breath. They were all in a trance, the stench hit their hearts and minds, and a few people couldn't help but vomited up against the tree. Daji fell to the ground and looked back, and saw that they were all spitting up against the tree, and one fell to the ground with a thud. Daji was so confident that he simply swung the knife, called the 3 of them, and said, let's go down. There were not many guards and officers in the convoy, and there were only 10 people including the driver. The people on the opposite side had already rushed down, and there were 20 people. Daji took out the medicine bottle, poured some medicine powder into everyone's hands, and led the 3 of them to run down quickly. When they reached the foot of the mountain, they jumped up with a kick, and went to the group of bandits. Someone saw after that, he slashed directly into the air. He didn't come to fight with them. With a wave of his hand, the powder in his hand was scattered, and he stepped on the chopped sword or the head of the person and flew past. The others followed suit. Anyway, they threw all the medicine powder on their hands, and they were a little bit indistinguishable between us. Some bandits are on the edge, the symptoms are not severe, and the feeling is not right. They turn around and run, and they are chased by the 4 Daji who have been covering their mouths and noses. Zhou Man and Zheng Gu 6 people dragged the 10 people tied with ropes down, looking at the bandits who were in a mess and trying to run away, and shouted, "What are you running? You are running out after being poisoned by me, there is no antidote, run out and wait to die." The person who persisted and wanted to run was stunned and stopped struggling.